in the darkest corners of the human experience. Few events are as emotionally destructive as a wrongful accusation. Imagine waking up one morning to find your life shattered, accused of something you didn't do, with no real evidence to support the claim. The weight of such an accusation is crushing, not only for the person falsely accused, but for their families and communities. The emotional toll alone is overwhelming, creating a storm of pain that ripples out to touch everyone involved. This story, like countless others before it, is a stark reminder of the power of assumptions and the devastating consequences of rushing to judgment. It speaks to a flaw in our justice system that we often overlook: how easily an innocent life can be derailed by mere suspicion and prejudice. Kevin's life changed in an instant. He had always been an upstanding member of his community, a quiet man with no enemies. But one fateful evening, he found himself at the center of a crime he had no part in. A robbery, violent and brutal, had occurred at a local jewelry store, and Kevin, who had been in the area at the time, was wrongly identified as the perpetrator. His name was whispered across the town as the suspect. His life suddenly turned upside down. Kevin was arrested, his home raided, and his reputation shattered. Despite the lack of any substantial evidence, the local authorities, driven by pressure to make an arrest, hastily pinned the crime on him. The media, eager for a story, pounced on the case, further cementing Kevin's presumed guilt in the eyes of the public. But the real tragedy wasn't just Kevin's arrest. It was the toll it took on his family. His wife, children, and friends were all forced to watch as the man they loved was slowly consumed by the weight of these false charges. In the weeks that followed, Kevin's life became a nightmare of legal battles, accusations, and heart-wrenching phone calls with his loved ones. He had no idea how to prove his innocence in a world that had already decided his guilt. As Kevin fought to clear his name, the system he had trusted seemed to close in on him. The prosecutor, eager for a quick conviction, relied on circumstantial evidence, a blurry eyewitness account, a rushed police lineup, and Kevin's proximity to the crime scene. But the defense argued that the evidence was flawed, pointing out inconsistencies and glaring gaps in the story. Kevin's lawyers worked tirelessly to find the truth, but the road to justice was long and fraught with frustration. What was even more disturbing was the constant presence of bias in the case. In many wrongful accusations, race, class, or even socioeconomic status often plays a significant role in how the accused is treated. Kevin, a black man from a lower-income background, found himself facing an uphill battle with little support from the system that was supposed to protect him. The media had already decided that Kevin was guilty. They painted him as a criminal in every headline, his face plastered on every news channel. And as the legal battle raged on, Kevin's reputation and his future seemed increasingly out of reach. Yet, despite it all, there was a glimmer of hope, a single shred of truth that Kevin clung to, the belief that eventually justice would be served. After years of battling for his freedom, Kevin's case finally reached a tipping point. The evidence that had once been used to convict him was now called into question. New DNA evidence, which had been overlooked during the initial investigation, came to light. This new evidence not only exonerated Kevin, but also pointed to the real perpetrator, someone who had been hiding in plain sight all along. In an emotional courtroom moment, the judge declared Kevin's innocence, but the damage had already been done. The years spent behind bars, the emotional toll, and the reputation he had lost could never be fully repaired. The truth had finally surfaced, but the scars of the false accusations would stay with him forever. But as Kevin stood there, a free man, he couldn't help but feel a deep, unresolved anger. His life had been taken from him, not by a crime he committed, but by the blind rush to judgment and the systemic flaws that allowed his wrongful accusation to spiral out of control. Kevin's story is not unique. There are countless examples of people who have been wrongfully accused and convicted, their lives upended by a legal system that too often prioritizes speed over accuracy and assumptions over evidence. Take the case of Amanda Knox, the American exchange student wrongly convicted of murder in Italy. Her story became a global spectacle, a tragic reminder of how quickly an individual's life can be consumed by the force of public opinion and the rush to judgment. Despite being innocent, Amanda spent years behind bars, fighting for her freedom in a country that seemed to already have its mind made up. Similarly, the Central Park Five, 5 young Black and Latino men who were wrongfully convicted of assault and rape based on coerced confessions, spent years in prison for a crime they didn't commit. Their story is one of horror and injustice, but also of redemption, as DNA evidence eventually proved their innocence. In each of these cases, the rush to judgment led to conviction of innocent people, often with devastating consequences. Whether it's the media's portrayal of the suspect, the biases inherent in police investigations, or the pressure to make quick arrests, the system has repeatedly failed to protect those it is meant to serve. As Kevin's case drew to a close, the focus shifted to the real perpetrator of the crime, the man who had evaded justice for years, while Kevin had been wrongfully imprisoned. The discovery of the real criminal was a shocking moment, one that highlighted the deep flaws in the investigative process. But what was even more unsettling was the realization that this wasn't just an isolated incident. The criminal justice system, in its haste to close cases, had allowed countless others to fall victim to the same fate as Kevin. With the real culprit now behind bars, Kevin was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. But the toll on his family was far from over. His wife, once a source of strength, now struggled with the emotional scars of seeing her husband wrongly accused. His children, who had grown up with a father in prison, would forever be affected by the years they lost. But through it all, Kevin refused to let the system win. He used his newfound freedom to become an advocate for others who had been wrongfully accused, speaking out about the flaws in the justice system and pushing for reforms. His story became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of the most overwhelming odds, the pursuit of truth must never be abandoned. As Kevin's voice grew stronger, so did the movement for justice reform. His efforts to raise awareness about wrongful accusations and their consequences resonated with others who had suffered the same fate. The media, which had once vilified him, now turned their attention to his cause, amplifying his message and pushing for accountability. Through his tireless advocacy, Kevin helped to create programs aimed at preventing wrongful convictions, such as better police training, reforms in forensic testing, and initiatives to improve the fairness of the judicial process. His journey from victim to advocate was a powerful example of the impact that one person can have on a broken system. But the fight was far from over. Kevin knew that the only way to truly change the system was to confront the biases and flaws at every level. And while his personal victory had been won, the battle for justice would continue, one case at a time. As Kevin walked out of the courtroom, the weight of his wrongful conviction still heavy on his shoulders, a flood of emotions overwhelmed him. The victory was sweet. After years of fighting, he was finally free. But that freedom came with a price. He had lost nearly a decade of his life, a time that should have been spent with his family, building memories and contributing to society. For Kevin, the hardest part was the realization that his fight wasn't just about him. It wasn't just about clearing his name and walking away with the truth. It was about the countless others who had been wrongfully accused, whose stories were lost in the system, and whose lives were destroyed by the failures of justice. He couldn't shake the thought that, for every person who was exonerated, there were still many more languishing behind bars, victims of a system that had failed them. The gnawing feeling of injustice was something Kevin couldn't ignore. It had become his mission to make sure that others wouldn't have to go through what he did. With newfound purpose, Kevin threw himself into advocacy work. He partnered with organizations that focused on justice reform, pushing for new laws to prevent wrongful convictions and advocating for better safeguards in the legal system. His own story became a rallying cry for reform, and slowly, he began to build a network of people who believed in the cause as much as he did. But the road to redemption was not smooth. Kevin faced backlash from many sectors. There were those who still believed he was guilty, and they used his past to discredit his efforts. The media, once again, tried to tarnish his image, calling him a convict, despite the fact that he had been proven innocent. The sting of public opinion was something he was still trying to navigate. In private, his family had mixed feelings about his newfound fame. His wife, Maria, was supportive but weary of the emotional toll that activism was taking on him. His children, who had grown up without him, struggled to understand why their father was suddenly so publicly involved in such a painful chapter of their lives. "Why do you have to keep fighting, Dad?" his son Jamal asked one evening. "Aren't you done now? Why bring up all that bad stuff again?" Kevin looked at his son, unsure of how to explain the depth of his commitment. Jamal, some battles aren't over until we make sure they never happen again. I didn't just fight for myself. I fought for people who will never get the chance to speak for themselves. I'm doing this so that no one else will go through what I did. The words hit harder than Kevin expected. Jamal's innocent question reminded him that, even after everything, his family was still the one group that had paid the price for his activism. The burden of his past would never be fully lifted, no matter how much progress he made. The haunting question of whether he could ever truly rebuild the life he once had continued to linger. But Marcus didn't give up. He continued his work, determined to find peace not just for himself, but for the countless others who had suffered. His work was paying off, but the system was still resistant to change. The legal process was slow, the opposition fierce, and the road ahead seemed unending. But each small victory, each law change, each person freed, kept him going. As Kevin's advocacy grew, so did the attention. The media couldn't ignore the force that was now pushing for justice reform. While some outlets were sympathetic, others, including many conservative voices, accused him of stirring division. Kevin was painted as an agitator, a term that had become a badge of honor for activists in the face of public dissent. Despite the growing opposition, Kevin continued to speak at rallies, town halls, and on news platforms. Each speech was a carefully crafted argument, not only for his innocence, but for the need to overhaul the criminal justice system that had nearly destroyed him. He recounted his experiences, the systemic flaws he had encountered, and the ripple effects that false accusations had on entire families. His powerful words reached millions, inspiring a new generation of activists and sparking nationwide conversations about criminal justice reform. One evening, after an emotional speech at a major justice reform rally, Marcus was met with a standing ovation. But as the applause died down, a sense of unease gripped him. He knew that his success would come at a cost. The more public his fight became, the more dangerous it was for him and his family. The threats were escalating. A series of anonymous phone calls came in, the voices on the other end laced with venom and threats. "You won't win this fight," one said. "You'll never escape your past. You'll regret it." Kevin had been warned before, but this time the words felt different. They were personal, coming from those who felt threatened by his success. Despite the mounting pressure, Marcus refused to back down. He knew that if he did, the system that had once destroyed him would continue its oppressive cycle. His commitment to fighting for justice was unwavering. The breaking point came one fateful evening, as Kevin prepared to speak at a National Justice Reform Summit. His security team had already made several arrangements to ensure his safety, but Kevin still felt uneasy. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. That evening, as he entered the venue, he noticed a man in the crowd staring directly at him. There was something unsettling about the stranger's gaze. Kevin's heart raced. It was as though the man knew something Kevin didn't. The unease only grew as the man made his way toward the stage, a subtle glint in his hand. Suddenly, Kevin was yanked backwards by a security team as gunshots rang out. The crowd screamed and scattered. Kevin's heart skipped a beat as he realized the danger he was in. His security team acted swiftly, neutralizing the threat. The shooter was apprehended, but the shock of the moment left Kevin shaken to his core. The shooter turned out to be a disgruntled former police officer, one who'd been involved in the case against Kevin years ago. It became clear that it harbored a deep resentment against Marcus for his efforts to expose the flaws in the justice system. But Kevin didn't let the near-death experience stop him. He was determined to continue his work, no matter the cost. In the days following the attack, the outpouring of support for Kevin was overwhelming. People from all over the country, even across the world, rallied behind him. He had become more than just an advocate for justice. He had become a symbol of defiance against a broken system. As time passed, Kevin's organization gained unprecedented support. Laws were reformed, policies were implemented, and wrongful convictions were overturned. But despite all the victories, Kevin remained grounded. He knew that change would take time, and that the system wouldn't be dismantled overnight. With his voice growing louder, Kevin continued to advocate for the countless others who were still trapped within the walls of an unjust system. He knew that the fight wasn't over. The battle for true justice would be an ongoing one, and he would continue to stand at the forefront, pushing for change. Kevin's story is a reminder that wrongful accusations have far-reaching consequences, not only for the person accused, but also for their families and communities. It teaches us that our justice system must be built on a foundation of fairness, thoroughness, and transparency. The pursuit of truth should always outweigh the rush to judgment, and it's essential that we hold ourselves accountable for the mistakes of the past. No one is immune from the possibility of being wrongfully accused. In the face of adversity, the pursuit of justice is not just a personal journey. It's a fight for all those who suffer in silence. By standing up for what is right and refusing to back down, we can create a future where justice truly serves everyone. Wrongful accusations are one of the darkest elements of our justice system, but as Kevin's wrongful story shows, even in the most challenging circumstances, there is hope for redemption, change, and progress. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, because the fight for justice isn't just about individual victories. It's about ensuring that everyone is afforded a fair trial, a voice, and a chance at freedom. This is the true cost of justice, and the reason why we must never stop advocating for a better system.